Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Abiodun Oker of Sarah Project Services. Today I have a guest, I have a colleague, I have a supply chain management professional originally from Malaysia who is now practicing in British Columbia. She has been a member of the Supply Jobs Canada for some time, I'm sure more than a year now, since she migrated to Canada. And we are celebrating actually our journey here in Canada through the session that I'm having with her today to uh, take us through our journey, a supply chain career journey, both from when she started supply chain career and also here in Canada, moving from Malaysia to Canada, and then also then breaking into our profession, supply chain management profession here in Canada. So you're welcome, Sukhvinder Kaur.
Yes, hi, Abby, and thank you for inviting me for this interview session, or shall I call it a chit chat session to actually get to
Yeah,
know me better, and
sure.
to get to know my experiences, and at the same time, my journey to Canada and my journey towards the procurement and supply chain environment and industry. I am very grateful with this offer and this opportunity, and I look forward to guiding everyone some kind, and I hope my experiences give some kind of insight to those who are also going through the journey in the future, or who already gone through the journey and can
Great,
share
great.
some
I mean,
experiences.
that'll be awesome. The thing is that everybody's journey is kind of different. So from the people that we talk with, we speak to other professionals that I've spoken with. I also myself have been, I've been learning from a lot of the things that they've been sharing with me. So I would say also this is an opportunity for me to learn from your journey. So I will start with just talking about your biography. So Sukhvinder Kaur Kalwant Singh, mostly known as Sukhy, is a senior buyer with the liquor distribution branch, responsible in managing uh, res- uh, the day-to-day activities of high-profile, high-risk, high-dollar value, and politically sensitive procurement in support of the category manager. She provides expert advice and analysis on procurement and contracting processes. She manages these processes on behalf of stakeholders while ensuring that procured and contracted services are effective, efficient, and consistent with LDB strategy directions. Suki had worked in three continents: Asia, Middle East, and recently North America over the past 10 years. She brings with her a wealth of knowledge both in accounting and procurement, with specific experiences in setting up new departments such as shared service centers and procurement department setups. Our experience ranges in many different industries, including public sector, oil and gas, chemicals, logistics, and currently the retail industry. A very detail-oriented person and makes a very good spy. Well, it's an interesting one. Perhaps something she could take up during retirement. Part-time student progressing with our SCMP certifications, a wife, a sister, a daughter-in-law, and a cousin. Suki comes from a very closely knitted family, and she's always missed by everyone whenever she's away. Suki loves spending time visiting her family and traveling to countries rich in culture. Oh, that's. I mean, I'd like to travel if I can afford it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean, affordability is always a question, but yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to travel when I was in the Middle
okay.
East, because it was quite in the central
Okay.
region.
Yeah. Well, how about can you actually share with us? I mean, I found that even more interesting than what I had in mind. Can you share with us the country that you have been to in your travels that you really miss so much? Like you like to visit again.
Okay, so right, so I was actually born and brought up in Malaysia. So my first initial career was actually in Malaysia with about 4 years in accounts payable,
Yeah.
So I used to set up shared services centers. That's where my experience had started off. And shared services center was becoming very famous in Asia Pacific because of the cost cutting initiatives that's been taken up by these large organizations.
Mm.
I was privileged enough to be given an opportunity to go to Japan
Ooh,
and
nice.
to take over to work shadow and take over the task of some of the background accounts payable task and bring it back to Asia, I mean to Malaysia,
Mm.
and start off the whole accounts payable department, as well as all the processing of the background task that is taken up from Japan. That is where my first experience of getting exposed to different cultures,
Mm.
which I had, and I really, really, really admire the Japanese culture. I really find them being so respectful, so obedient, um, and I think respectful says it all. They are so polite. That's where I started enjoying and understanding their culture, and I made very good friends with them.
Nice.
And uh, despite they knowing that we are going to take over their task and their job and bring it back to Malaysia, which was a management decision, they
Right.
were never reluctant to actually help me out to make sure that
Oh,
I was good enough and I was well equipped to go back to Malaysia and perform the task.
that's interesting.
um, yeah, I was quite surprised. The positivity and the encouragement that they showed was really great. After Malaysia, I moved on to Qatar in the Middle East. I had an opportunity to actually set up a accounts payable department over there. However, when I moved there, they needed me to start off a procurement department ASAP because the company was already going live, and it's a government oil and gas marketing company. It's a multi-billion dollar organization where they are actually they're marketing all the oil and gas that's produced in Qatar on behalf of the producing entities like Shell, Exxon, and everyone. Right, so all these companies have to go through this company to be able to be marketing their products, and it was extremely huge in volume, and they needed the procurement department to be set up ASAP because of a lot of back orders that was pending, and needed to be done ASAP. And I took up the challenge. That was my first step to the procurement industry, and I was grateful that I made that decision. In accounts payable, we used to work a lot with procurement department as well because all POs that's been issued by procurement comes back to accounts payable. So I was challenged, and I was excited to take up this new journey in the procurement department, as well as being a startup organization. And I successfully managed to set up the whole organization with the help of extremely uh, good bosses, well experienced and well organized bosses who actually come from very stringent oil and gas industries,
Mm.
and they were put there as a consultants, and they actually guided me all along my journey in the procurement industry and helped me understand how it works and what are the policies and procedures that needs to be followed. And that actually made me take up a very steep learning curve, and I enjoyed the entire learning curve that I actually learned in the procurement department. And I moved on to another company, which is the museum industry after that, which is also a very similar task where we are actually setting up a new organization as Qatar was moving from oil and gas focus. They were looking into tourism as well.
Ooh.
So yeah,
So all of this in Malaysia, or
no,
did
no,
you
in
have to,
Qatar. This is in
in
Qatar.
Qatar? Oh, this is in
Qatar,
Qatar. Great. Okay.
Qatar. Yes, yes.
Okay.
So
Because I don't
my
want to lose you
experience.
there.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So my experiences in Malaysia was generally on accounts payable, and
Okay.
my experience in Qatar is where my whole procurement journey started.
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
Right.
I mean,
So
that's a very rich background. I mean, having to combine all of these industries and all of this, moving to these different cultures, I mean, I imagine you have to adapt to all these cultures that you're also moving to as well as part
Yes,
of that
that's
journey.
true.
Can
That's
you
true.
share your experience in terms of how you've been able to adapt to these different cultures, and also being able to effectively perform on the job? I mean, it's one thing to know your job; it's another thing to be able to navigate these cultures.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, it is actually not difficult to adjust. Honestly, you have to go with a very open mind. That's your magic spell there. Go with an open mind. Don't have expectations,
Mm,
and they are very similar, honestly, with the Malaysian culture. I must say, because we all come from multicultural societies. So there's a lot of elements on being independent and being able to adjust and compromise, and being able to work with the situation. So I think having that in mind always wherever you go keeps you flexible enough to adjust to any kind of a culture. It doesn't have to be a culture, or you don't have to be afraid about knowing on how to adapt, because the thing is that having that in mind, being flexible enough and being an open-minded person helps a lot in getting that risk
right.
out of your kind of thoughts, right?
I'm not surprised how you were able to also quickly adjust the Canadian culture. Moving to
Yeah.
different cultures, you kind of build that strength, to be able to adapt easily to different cultures. I don't think somebody who was, exposed to different culture to start with, in your career. For me, I think a question that I would like to ask you on a personal level is, what are those things that you consider to be your strengths that makes you to be adaptable to all this culture and also to still be able to perform on the job?
I think the ability of not giving up, that is my main drive to things. The first thing I always do is I always look into situations, and then I try to make some kind of options that I have, and I make my decisions. And once I make my decisions, I try to stick to it as much as possible. So this is what I try to do whenever I need to make some serious decisions and I need to look into some major changes in my life. And with that I go all out, not to mention that I've got a lot of support and encouragement from my family to boost my spirit, to keep me going all the way and encourage me all the way. Like I said, we are very closely knitted family. My cousins to that level as well has constantly reminded me on not to give up. They have always constantly given me make calls to me, make sure that I have always being strong enough, and encourage me, and my aunts and my uncles and my parents for sure. They had a lot of trust in me, and
Yeah.
my husband, who supported me continuously while I was here. And I think, in addition to that, what motivated me as well is that my kids were so young, and their ability to make the decision that they like to be here, and they like to actually I learn more about this culture in Canada. And I think that those are the areas where actually helped me to understand and motivated me to move on and be able to believe in myself.
Yeah. Okay, that is very important anyways. I mean, believing in yourself is very, very critical, whatever you'd like to accomplish, because of course things will get in the way and then still going strong, regardless of what all those things that are happening around you. Of course, just like you're saying, not giving up, basically,
Yeah.
gets you closer to your goals even than any other thing, because you never give up, and that's why you're able to achieve those things. Great, great. Thanks for that bit of introduction where you're able to tell us about, yourself without even asking you directly, that it is sometimes, so I haven't talked about all these different cultures that you were opportune to have being exposed to. I mean, talking about the Japanese culture, you were in Qatar, even though I didn't even ask much about Qatar. But what is the one thing or memory that you missed most about, let's say, maybe the Malaysian culture where you're coming from before, immigrating to Canada? And beyond just the Malaysian culture, um, some people might have this question that they probably thought maybe you're of an Indian descent. Can you help us to understand how that works out? Being originally from a Malaysian culture to Canada, what is the connection with India?
Okay, so my great grandparents actually were from India, and they migrated to Malaysia many, many years back. And my parents were born in Malaysia, and I'm the second generation born in Malaysia.
Mhm.
So, and my kids will be the third. So this is how the migration happened during many years back ago. Um, and I think the most of the Malaysian culture has got people coming from very different countries. We have people coming from China, Malay, from Indonesia, and Indians from India. So it is a country which has multicultural, and it has mainly three main religions: Malay, Chinese, and Indians. And these are the concrete foundation of actually my upbringing, where when we go to school, we meet and we live with all these three different multicultural people, and we grow up with them. We learn about their culture, we learn about their food, we learn about their celebrations, their festivals. We go to each other's house during each other's festivals. We eat each
Mhm.
other's food. So I think being exposed to a very multicultural background is something that I was expecting over here in Canada as well, and as well as in Middle East, because even in the Middle East there's a lot of different cultures that's available. And now with the world being very small, I think in most countries we are all multicultural already.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, so I got it right there. I mean, talking about the multiculturalism of Malaysia is something that you could relate with, and then that actually is sort of what you think Canada also would be like. Which Canada actually is also a multicultural country because you have people from all cultures here. This is a melting pot of all cultures. And for me, one of the because I'm someone who likes to eat, different type of foods.
Yeah.
It's one thing I really
Yes.
like about Canada. You can decide to have meal from different culture for the next 1 year. Each day you eat a different type of food.
I I totally agree. That was actually one of my motivations to come to Canada, actually, because I know that I will be exposed to so many different cultures. I mean, in Malaysia, we only had three major cultures, but I know in Canada we're going to be exposed to a lot more. And yeah, it was
Yeah,
interesting.
I saw at some point I saw the profile of the school where my kids attend, and they
Hmm.
mentioned in the different type of cultures that are in that school. I mean, there are about 70 different cultures, like seven
Wow.
different countries, people from seven different countries. So that just tells you the kind of multiculturalism that we also have in Canada here, which is similar to what you're talking about. Malaysia being a multicultural country as well. So
Correct.
that's a good.
Speaking of your school, in Qatar, when I was working for the oil and gas company, we only had about 60, sorry, we only had about 100 staff, and we had 25 different cultures.
Wow, wow, that's
So yeah, yeah, that was my first exposure to an extremely large number of multicultural people, and working with them was very, very interesting.
interesting. So how about let's talk about how you actually get your first ever job in supply chain. I know you spoke a little bit about there, like you worked in accounts payable, and at some point you also worked in setting up procurement department.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but can you, when I say your first ever job, how did you even get into accounts payable to start with?
Okay. So accounts payable is something that I got when I just graduated. So my first ever job was in a HR department, working for a taxation as a taxation administrator. I used to prepare taxation documentations for the expatriates who were working in Malaysia. It was for a large company called Philip Morris,
Okay.
and that was the company that I was working. But it was on contract because I was still very new and fresh in the working environment. And my first ever accounts payable experience actually started off in DHL, which was the company that I worked for to go to Japan and to do the work shadowing and bring back the task. After that, I moved on to BASF, which is a chemical company, and similar kind of experiences where I serviced Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand as their background accounts payable, task processing invoices, right up to the payments. And when I was working in BSF, I had the opportunity to be interviewed to be going to Qatar to set up the accounts payable department in Qatar, which is the oil and gas marketing company called Tasweek. And I successfully passed the interview, and I was given the opportunity to move to Qatar. The process took me almost a year because I was single. I was single at that point of time. So being not married, there's a lot of
Oh,
restrictions
yeah, yeah.
about my well-being. Yeah, so that was the cultural differences which I was exposed to. There must be a lot of considerations being made because being a single person coming to Qatar as a female, I have to be able to adjust to the situations and the regulations as well. So, but what happened is that interim, since it took 1 year, I was already planning to get married at that same year. So I did get married, and I think that's also part of the whole year's experience in 2007. And finally in December 2007, I was given the opportunity to move, and all the documentations were ready for me to move, and I did that. My husband joined me as well, and he got himself transferred there, and thereafter he found a job in Qatar as well, with me. So both of us were started our journey in Qatar. And in Qatar, when I reached there, I was given the opportunity to start up the procurement department, and started working on creating quotations and RFPs, requests for proposals, and trying to do contracts. And I had a very good team of SAP consultants with me who could help me with working with the SAP part and the operating part of the system. And they themselves gave me all kind of guidance and some kind of experience, a quick learning experience on how to manage the whole procurement department, and be familiar with all the policies and procedures. And I had a very good supporting bosses who were my business, who are my requesters, who kindly gave me very clear directions on how and what they really wanted, and how we can purchase them. So I have to just manage them, and ensure that the product is provided, and there's and make sure that it's good value for the money that's been paid, right? And yeah, so I think all in all, what I would say is like the guidance that I got from the organization and the bosses that I was working with is the one that actually helped me to be successful in that particular role.
Yeah, great.
So yeah.
Interesting. So basically, you got some help along the way, getting into supply chain anyways. But getting into the accounts payable thing, you did mention you work with some other industry even before getting into accounts payable. Um, but here is a question I would like to kind of segue into. In like when you were working, figuring these things out, like accounts payable, working in procurement, especially the procurement area where you say you actually set up a procurement department. Um, how did you get a balance there? Because I know when you're going through this kind of situation where you're just getting into procurement and then you have to set up a department.
Okay.
if these type of challenges sometimes could be a lot of pressure, you to deliver. How did you get your balance in this type of environment, knowing that you're still going through learning curves and procurement, and then you have to set up a department? How do you what are those things that you did to help you get some sort of balance, overall in this scenario?
All right. So the experience in the Qatar, the company called Tasweek, was that that I was supposed to manage the whole procurement department by myself. So when I say setting up the department, is not having a team to work with. It's managing everything all by myself. So yes, like you said correctly, that there was high expectations. There were expectations to deliver, and there were expectations to ensure that everything was running smooth and perfectly fine, with reportings and trackings that's been in place. So I must say the first year was very, very, very challenging. There was a lot of my personal time that was just demanded. I was okay with that because of the fact that I was just married, and that's all. I mean, I didn't have any kids or family, so I could
Not even going at the same time.
yeah, yeah, right. And so I could put in a lot of personal time to do some research and check around with other companies and find out and see, research around a little bit, like how things are done in Qatar and how things are managed. At the same time, my first year of experience, I must say that I was focusing a lot on trying to actually educate the teams and the people in the company to make sure that they are following policies, how to train them to set up purchase requests in the system, guide them on how they can get their items, talk to them and get clarification and get making sure that the proper scope of work is being provided. A lot of my time was actually taken on those kind of work, whereby during my performance appraisal, I was being alerted by my boss to tell me that I should stop doing that and should be focusing on proceeding on my task. You see,
Oh,
and that is where I kind of felt that, oh, okay, yeah, that probably the expectations were not as per what I thought it was. And the following year, I improved. I actually started focusing on. It wasn't that bad because most of the people were already trained in the first year as well. So it's like there wasn't that much of time that I needed to train them back in the second year. And I started excelling because of the fact that I already had good trained people in hand to know how to raise PRs, to provide me proper scope of work, proper description of what they want. And from there on, I will be able to focus on my job and be able to get my requests all out in time and get the items in time for them to enjoy the purchases that they have wanted. So the initial 1 year was very, very challenging. There's a lot of lessons learned in there, which I appreciated, and I took it up with a positive mind and positive attitude towards it. And I learned how to improve from it. And from the second year, I've got a lot of feedback, very positive feedback, and appreciation right up from the CEO, and that kept me going. That kept me happy in my role. And I also got a lot of personal thank yous dropping by my office and personally telling me thank you for the job that I did.
I mean, that makes a lot of because the question I was actually going to ask you next is, you've been in the procurement supply chain for a long time. So even despite the challenges, the pressure, the expectations, you still stuck to this profession. I was going to ask you, okay, what is that thing that you think kept you in the profession? I mean, you're coming from accounts payable, you're an accountant. Something
Mm-hmm.
stuck out, that makes you feel like this is the profession you want to practice on a long term. What is that thing for
Yeah.
you?
All right. So I had my experience in accounting and I had my experience in procurement. And I always ask myself the same question: which one do I want to go for? And I finally decided to choose procurement because of the fact that I love procurement in the sense that it gives me an opportunity to really get a chance to communicate with people, learn a lot. I constantly learn a lot about new things, about new products in the market, analysis, a lot of analysis work that's involved. So I find procurement was a little bit more processing kind of a task, and I find procurement being more engaging. So having a personality of loving to talk to people, loving to communicate, and having the ability to be a good communicator, and having the ability to be able to predict and understand what is required in the future, and plan things in advance. I think all my this natural abilities is the one that drove me towards procurement. And the best of all, being being a woman, I always look for value. Yeah, so it's always
I think you said the best one.
yeah, the best one is like my personal trait of being a woman. I always look for the best value.
Uh,
So right, so
got it.
I always like to make sure that whatever I've purchased, even in my personal life, it's well justified. It's well, it's the best value of an item. So it's not necessarily it's always cheapest, but it's always has to be like the money paid well for, right?
Yeah.
So so these natural abilities that I had in me had given me the drive to actually go with procurement, as I could see myself implementing all the skills that I have into procurement, and making sure that the company and the organization is given the best value as well.
I think I get it now. You're basically the practicing the supply chain profession for you brings out your strength.
Yeah.
What I hear you say. I think I believe you like shopping too. Based on the way
I do.
you talked about getting the base value. I can read that you like shopping. Yeah. So
Yeah, and yeah, I like to go and shop for things to make sure that I'm buying the right things for the right product.
okay,
Yeah.
great, great. So here's a question which borders on, how I got to know you. Basically, it's a question about the Supply Jobs Canada. How did you know about Supply Jobs Canada, and how did the network help you in achieving, some of your career goals here in Canada?
Okay, so I actually started. I was actually. I mean, I came in Canada in 2017,
Mm,
and that was to actually do my first landing. And when I came here, I wanted to have a feel and understanding about how is it like. However, I was because I just moved from Qatar to Malaysia. I wasn't ready to make the drastic move of moving to Canada straight away. So I decided to go back to Malaysia, and while I was in Malaysia, I was looking at a couple of ways of making my move in Canada. I mean, the 2 years I was in Malaysia, I was trying to plan for my move over here. So while I was there, I was still working. I was working in the IT industry, and it was for project accounting kind of a role, and it was involving on a lot of project accounting task that I was doing for the company, and to better understand the procurement department. As I was saying, my journey in procurement started off just because I started from an organization, but I lacked the proper knowledge and understanding in detail of what the whole procurement industry was all about, and the ultimate objective of the procurement department. So I started reading, I started following the job from back home, and so that's where my journey with Supply Chain Canada has started. And when I came here, I joined the WhatsApp group that we have, and I was able to actually understand a lot more in detail what kind of discussions that we have, and I really find that very important, because we have all kind of like previously my previous experience, there was a lot of issues that's going on, and we didn't have proper discussions on with other experts and other professionals in the similar industry who probably would have faced the same kind of issues, and probably who had some kind of insights on how did they manage those kind of problems and those kind of processes, you see. So, and especially on process improvement, I'm all out for process improvement. I'm all out to make things better for the procurement department and for the buyers. So I'm looking out and searching out for ideas when I want to do things like that. So having a platform where we can actually share experiences and be able to guide each other and share the knowledge among each other, and in one go we have different we have understanding of how different organizations and corporate work. So
what is the most important leadership lessons you've learned in your career, and how has it proven invaluable to your team and your career development?
I would say coaching, coaching and mentorship. I would say these are very, very important, as people can be trained for systems, but being a good coach, being a good role model is where my experience have taught me that it's invaluable. Being the right person, a good person, being respectful enough, having proper respect against each other, towards each other, and to make sure that I mean, no matter what is said and done, there's a lot of ups and downs in the procurement industry, in the procurement department, a lot of challenges that we face every day, but not being able to lose yourself and stay composed to yourself, and always project a good personality and a proper trait towards the team is the most important thing. So based on my previous experience, I was saying that I knew I was new and I had a steep learning curve, but I had very, very good mentors who were my bosses, who actually guided me and made me successful in that procurement department. And I feel that has been proven, right? So I think coaching and mentorship is the key to things. Even now, currently, as I work with my team, I constantly make sure that the team is well knowledged. Even though they don't need the knowledge, I share with them to make sure that they have they have the entire understanding, because I was privileged enough to have the end-to-end procurement experience, where I start from the purchasing and I end up till the accounts payable. So I know, and I'm very well aware about what's the implications towards accounting and what we can do from the procurement end to make sure that the implications does not reach to the accounting end, right? So I share this kind of knowledge, and I make sure that people have a better understanding, and I think coaching and of course mentorship is the most important part.
Great, great. Yeah, I really like that angle of things. I mean, for anyone who, especially if you're just growing your career or you're transitioning to a leadership managerial role, that mentoring and coaching is very, very key, at any stage in your career, to actually have a role model, somebody who shows you how it should be, and to kind of provide those expectations that guides your actions, and help you eventually to become successful as well. I think that's very, very critical. I do agree with you on that for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Let me go to another question here that I think also would help to gain an insight into your activities within the procurement and supply chain management space. Mention two supply chain or procurement initiatives that you are proud to have managed or been involved with in the course of your career, and why are you choosing these two initiatives?
So apart from my success in trying to set up the whole organization all by myself, and managing it and running it to ensure that it's successful, that is my main achievement over there. In addition to that, I had the experience of actually managing a very, very high complex and high value purchasing that I did for SAP consultants. So it was a service. It was complicated because the fact that evaluation was going to be difficult. How do you choose to say one service provider is better than the other? And it all depends on the consultants that they provide and they brought forward. We already had some existing ones in place as well. So we didn't want to actually change anything because these people are already very familiar with the setup of the organization and the systems that's been set up initially, so they're well aware about that. So the procurement part of it was very, very challenging. The value was about up to $1.2 million US dollars. So it was very high risk, high value, and it was a very difficult and a lengthy process to do the whole procurement process, and that's in addition to my already busy procurement tasks and activities that I have on a daily basis, right? So my concentration on that was difficult, but we managed to successfully achieve it. We had a lot of challenges trying to make sure that the proposals were set out right. I had a lot of back and forth with the IT manager. He guided me to make sure that the proposals were set out correctly and make sure the scope of work was clearly defined. And then when it came to evaluation, he had a lot of insights about how to categorize the qualities of the proponents, and help me to draft out the evaluation. So I think yeah, so this is where my exposure and my experience on my first time experience and exposure to a high value and a high complexity of a project that actually got me the experience, invaluable experience to actually process and complete the end-to-end purchasing of the SAP consultants. This is one of the major initiatives that I've worked for.
Great, that's awesome. Any other one that is on your mind, or?
I think apart from that, it was like some kind of building maintenance projects that I've worked on as well. That was also another high value project that I had to work on. Where it was quite expensive, especially to have building maintenance managers to be in place. And so this is where the problem actually arises, where we have to narrow down what are the specs, and we didn't have someone to consult us on what are the specs that's required in the building maintenance. So we kind of like broke down as much as possible. We try to leverage it out as much as possible to make sure that we get apple to apple kind of a comparison, and the services, and we try to plan it out accordingly to make sure that our procurement strategy is accordance to the policies and procedures, and at the same time it brings in the right value and is proven to be right value.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I really like those two projects you talked about. They are complex, high value projects. Usually, especially with services, is the first one you mentioned there. They're the most difficult type of procurement you would ever do, because comparing services, it's a little bit of a challenge, in that each supplier is different in terms of even their proposals. Sometimes even the solutions they are providing, they're all different. So how do you compare these things? So it's challenging. So I could definitely relate with that. Yeah, and let's go for another question here. Which is usually the funny one I like to ask. So the question here is, what would you like to be when you grow up?
I'm already grown up. Okay, so let's say when I grow older.
Like, okay, if you have an opportunity to start from the scratch, what would you like to be?
What would I like to be when I grow up? I think I enjoy my current profession.
So yeah, professional?
Yeah, as a procurement professional, I cannot really enjoy it. And as I grow older, I look myself as if I get an opportunity to be a spy, I'll be a spy.
Oh, guys, I
but
remember you had that one there too.
but I think
Is that like a
what
dream when you were younger, or what? Like you wanted to be a spy when you
no, I mean, I'm just a very analytical person, so I like to
Oh,
analyze
yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah, I
and
see what you
you
mean.
know, I like to be very detailed to make
Then
sure
you
that
might find analytics interesting then.
yeah, I do like analytics a lot, and that's where I love the evaluation part of the whole procurement
Oh,
cycle.
okay,
Because
yeah.
look to myself as becoming a consultant in the near future, using my
All right.
experiences in setting up new organizations and drafting RFPs, and being able to contribute my experiences into helping companies to make sure that they have the right information provided when they submit proposals.
All
So
right, great.
that's where I'm looking at that. Yeah.
Yeah, that answers the questions too. Okay then. How about you know, I haven't gone through this journey and all the lessons that you have learned so far. I'm sure there will be some people that are listening to you right now and they're thinking, okay, what are the three most important insights that you have gained? Haven't you know broken into your profession here in Canada? What are those three key insights that you think could help new job seekers in Canada?
So I think the most important thing is to make sure, if you are interested in the supply chain industry, is make sure that you have the right accreditations. So as if you've observed a lot of job postings, they have actually mentioned SCMP as part of the requirement. So go ahead and get those accreditations. It will be very, very useful to you. And it's just not as a job seeking thing, but also the knowledge and the content of the training and the education and the knowledge that you get from there is more applicable to Canadian environment. So it will really help you to actually be able to understand how procurement is done in Canada. And in addition to that, you also meet people, so your networking is also done with that. And that gives you a very good idea about leveraging yourself and ensuring that you have the right information to actually start up in Canada. So accreditation is one thing. Going through the job postings, make sure that whatever has been asked in the job postings is clearly defined in your resume or in your cover letter. If they say that you need to have negotiation skills, make sure you have mentioned negotiation skills in your cover letter, and try to elaborate at least one sentence on where and when you did use those kind of skills. These are things that you really have to follow, have to make sure, because these are the things that there's always going to be asked for. Based on my experience over here, is that make sure that the points, I mean, some organization actually mention all kind of skills, but the thing is that try to pull out the most important ones which you think it's going to be needed in that particular organization. And as experienced as you are, you already know what are the important skills that's going to be needed in the procurement industry. So try to draw their attention towards those kind of skills, and ensure that that's been clearly defined and said. The one thing I noticed over here is that they don't like lengthy resumes, so you don't have to make something very lengthy. Just have to make it short and brief, and just adjust your resume towards what has been mentioned in the job description, and then that's all that they want to know, and just stick to that.
Okay. Maybe I'm thinking the perspective from which you are speaking. There are some people who would have PhDs and they will have, all the degrees, masters, and all that. And then when there is a job posting and they're asking for this much, then why would you then tell them, about your
Yeah,
degrees and your PhDs when that's
correct.
what they're asking for?
Yeah,
Is that
script that out. You don't have to script it out, but don't have to put it in the highlight. So
exactly?
if, yeah, so you can put it as your education background, having a master in this or a degree in this, but it's just one sentence. That's it. You don't have to explain what you did in your masters.
Mm,
You just have to make sure that you explain your experiences related to the procurement job, because being overqualified is one thing, but the thing is that I'm not sure. I've not been exposed too much on having overqualified certification opportunities, but what I do really feel is that having the adequate number of experience is more than enough, and more related experience is the most important part. I did not actually proceed with my any education in my procurement because I wanted to come into it over here. And when I came here last year in January, by April, I actually got an interview with BC Hydro, and I was quite surprised. They actually really called me up for an interview because of the fact that I just submit my resume just like normal, and I didn't have SCMP, and I didn't have the right knowledge. Of course, I didn't get the job, but that was totally fine. But the interview experience actually was very, very good because that had me understanding the fact that the areas that they're looking at, honestly. So they are always going to be sticking to the points that has been mentioned in the job description. So
definitely.
yeah.
Okay, great. Those are very great insights. Just in case you are listening and you are still job searching in Canada, Sukhvinder mentioned three things there. She talked about making sure that your resume goes straight to the point, the highlights area, making sure you're doing your networking properly, you're networking within the industry to make the right contacts. And also I'll add that just because even the hidden jobs, a lot of people talk about hidden jobs in the industry, you gain access to those hidden jobs when you network, because then people who are looking, to fill these roles in their companies. And then also I think finally, Sukhvinder,
Accreditation.
accreditation, like getting those certifications, recognitions of your experience, equivalent experience here in Canada. Also, those are very critical. So finally, what are those things, three also, if you may, that somebody who is still out there, maybe in Malaysia, in Qatar, in India, what are those three things that you think that they should do?
I think yeah, sorry.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay. So I think the three things that you are supposed to do or should really do and spend some time is that researching on LinkedIn. Try to research and see what are the jobs that's available, which industry that you like to work with, which industry you like to target in. And my approach was to select the industry. Like I really wanted public sector, so I was targeting on public sector. Just stick to that as much as possible. It's a little bit slower in getting the job, but the thing is that your focus and your concentration is there, so that helps, you see. If you're not interested in any other industry, just don't waste your time focusing on those things. Just try to stick to your industry that you're interested in, and approach that as much as possible. And look at the job descriptions that has been posted, look at the roles that's been posted, and you kind of like have a good understanding on the season of all these hirings that's been done, on the approach on how this hirings has been done. Very, very, very good platform is LinkedIn. And also make sure that you go through the supply chain management professional or supply chain management associations or any other supply chain professional websites, which you can actually find out and see what are the things that's going to be involved and what is going to be required. And so these are the things that's going to help you to understand what is needed in Canada, and how things are done over here, and have a good feel. Not to forget as well those there's networking NGOs that they work over here, like Work BC and Service Canada, and get in touch with all of them, because some of them actually have programs which are performing remotely. So you can actually already get into their programs from back at home. And also, in addition to that, look at the hiring companies, recruiters who are more related to the procurement industry. Like Horizon is more focused on hiring people which are related to procurement industry. So look for those kind of avenues to actually reach out to those people.
Awesome. That's great. I learned quite some things there too. So you did mention about focusing on the industry of your interest. Don't just spray resume all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to it, honestly, because I know some people are trying to see that I need to get a job as soon as possible to sustain my cost of living. So if you have the means of actually managing it, then please just focus on one thing, put your focus on one thing, and go all out for it. And if you don't, then you try to look at other alternatives to gain some kind of experience, at least, my experience over here as well. I was working in a private company and in an engineering firm for about 4 months before I actually got this public sector opportunity. And I took up that challenge because it's a junior buyer role, and I knew that I could do the job very well. I just needed to understand how and feel how is it done over here. So it was a 4 month contract, which I was totally happy with. It's not a too long-term contract where I'm going to be stuck with. Gave me a good idea, good insight on how the culture is and the expectation levels of this culture, Canadian culture is all about. And yep, then you just move on from there.
Yeah. Thanks for also touching on those key points there. I think you also mentioned for those people who are outside, they're looking to come to Canada, maybe they are paper already or they're still kind of working on it. You also mentioned that they should explore research on LinkedIn about this industry. Beyond that, also get in touch with or online reach out to these government settlement agencies who probably have some programs that are run remotely. They could do it even from outside before actually landing in Canada.
Yeah, yeah. I had an opportunity to do interview sessions as well as resume writing with them, and I think the most important part was the interview session, which I feel they actually, the way how they build up your confidence when you're going for an interview was very, very important. It lifts up your spirit, it lifts up your, gives you the encouragement, and you build a one-to-one relationship with them, and they continuously encourage you. That was very, very important for me when I came over here, and I think that that's something that everybody should also have.
Right, right, right. So it's been quite some time. I'm probably sure we spent an hour already. But I like to get like a parting word from you to those people who are out there. It could be a word of encouragement. It could be your own philosophy about life. It could be, some words of wisdom. What can you share with your listeners as a parting word?
Okay, so this is something that I always share even with my husband, because I made the move to come here first, and then now my kids have joined me, and my husband is going to be joining me soon as well, hopefully, as soon as he gets a job opportunity over here. And so the words of encouragement I would say is like, don't be too worried about Canadian culture. Don't be too worried about not knowing the Canadian background or things like that. There's a lot of hype about Canadian culture, and that actually gives you some cool sweat and cold feet over things. And don't be too stressed about that, because honestly, if you are a professional coming from a professional background, with today's current situation, most of us have already worked in multiple organizations, multiple cultures, you see. So I don't really think it's going to be very difficult to adjust. Just keep an open mind towards things, and be able to keep an open mind and make sure that you do your best wherever you are, and try to follow whatever has been said, and follow the right instruction, and be who you are, basically. Don't have to be too abrupt about things, but look at things in a more diplomatic way, and be able to adjust accordingly. So that's my main takeaway from here. I was overwhelmed by the fact that people say it's like no Canadian experience, no Canadian cultural experience. I was struggling honestly a lot, trying to understand like what is so different about Canada, what is so
Yeah.
different about Canadian culture. But when I actually, now that I'm currently working, and I realized that there's nothing so different, honestly.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just have to be professional, and as long as you're professional enough and coming from the background that you are, which you expect, which is already exposed to a multiple cultural situations, that is what Canada is all about, actually.
Okay, great, great, great. Thanks so much for your time, Sukhvinder. So there it is, guys. I hope this helps you even along your journey as you uh, break into your career, whatever it is, or even if it's supply chain profession. I hope this helped you a lot if you're still even out there and you're still kind of navigating moving to Canada. I'm sure Suvinder has helped you to know that this is something that is possible. You know, never give up. You know,
Yeah.
it's one
Yep.
thing that Suvinder also mentioned here today. So we really appreciate your time, Suvinder. I also learned a lot from you. Even though this is the first time we're gonna have this type of conversation, it helps us even in the Supply Jobs Canada group to help build that bond amongst the members in the network. So I really appreciate that. By the way, since you talked about mentoring and coaching, maybe I'm gonna assign somebody for you to mention to mentor. Sometimes because that's what we do in Supply Jobs Network, right? Like we like
Yeah.
to help others who are still just kind of starting their own journey, and I really appreciate. I really appreciate your time here today. Thanks so much, and you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much for accepting me in Supply Chain Canada's team and
Supply Jobs
family.
Canada.
Sorry, supply chain, sorry, supply jobs. Sorry, I'm just too much into SEMP at the moment,
Yeah, I
so
know, I know.
apologize.
It's okay.
Yeah, so supply jobs, correct. Yeah, so accepting me and continuously guiding me and giving me the encouragement and helping me to clear up all the doubts that I had. And yeah, and I truly enjoy all these experiences that people are sharing in this chat, and we are able to share our thoughts, knowledge, and experiences together to resolve issues and learn from it, of course. So these are continuous learning, and it's very important in our roles and in our profession as well. And it adds a lot of value to you. So thank you so much for taking the initiative to start this off for all of us and help us to connect with each other.
Great, great. Thanks so much. Bye for now, Sukhvinder.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Okay,
Okay,
then
bye.
bye.